بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. Last time we went over the obligatory actions and the sunan of as-salah, and now we're going to the fada'il, or the recommended actions that do not reach the level of the sunnah. قال المصنف رحمه الله: وفضائلها رفع اليدين عند الإحرام حتى تقابلا الأذنين وقول المأموم والفذ ربنا ولك الحمد. So the first one is raising the hands when making takbirat al-ihram until they meet the ears, meaning the fingertips reach the ears. And this is similar to the Hanafi madhab, in which we raise the hands during takbirat al-ihram. However, we do not raise them during other parts of the salah, such as going into ruku' and coming back from ruku', such as the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis do. So it's recommended to raise during the ihram and no other time. وقول المأموم والفذ ربنا ولك الحمد. So last time we said that the imam and the person praying alone, when he comes up from ruku', he says سمع الله لمن حمده. Now we're talking about ربنا ولك الحمد, which is the second part. It is only recommended for the ma'moom, person praying behind the imam, and the person praying alone. So the person praying alone, he says ربنا ولك الحمد, سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد. As for the imam, he only says سمع الله لمن حمده, and for the ma'moom, person in congregation, he only says ربنا ولك الحمد. والتأمين بعد الفاتحة للفذ والمأموم. So saying Ameen after the Fatiha for the person praying alone and the person praying behind the imam. And it's recommended to say it quietly rather than say it out loud. However, it is not a huge issue whether it's said out loud or not. But the original ruling in the madhab is that it's said quietly. ولا يقولها الإمام إلا في قراءة السر. So the imam, he does not say Ameen except when he is reading silently. So in the final two rak'ahs of al-Isha, the final rak'ah of al-Maghrib, and in Dhuhr and in Asr, he reads silently, so he will say Ameen then. But if he's reading out loud, then it is only for the ma'moom and the person praying alone. Al-Fadh. والتسبيح في الركوع والدعاء في السجود. So the tasbih when going into ruku', this is known by everyone, and dua during sujood. So there's also tasbih in sujood, but in addition, there is dua during ruku', dua during sujood as a recommended action. وتطويل القراءة في الصبح والظهر. So it is recommended that long surahs are chosen. Overall, in all of the prayers, it's recommended that he reads from the Mufassal of the Quran, which is, according to some scholars, from Surah Qaf till the end of Quran, or according to others, from Surah Al-Hujurat till the end of the Quran. It's recommended that throughout any prayer, he chooses from these surahs. Now, in a subh and in a dhuhr, it is recommended for him to choose long surahs. وتقصيرها في العصر والمغرب. As for al-Asr and al-Maghrib, it's recommended for him to choose very short surahs, especially in al-Maghrib. And in al-Isha, he reads medium-sized surahs. Yes. So Sheikh, can you please tell when to say A'udhu Billah and Bismillah and Salah before and after Fatiha? As we discussed last class, it is makruh to recite A'udhu Billah and Bismillah before the Fatiha, because this is considered from the actions of reciting Quran outside of the Salah. As for part of the Salah, it's not considered a recommended action in the Salah itself, because it's not part, the Basmala is not considered part of the Al-Fatiha. As it is going to mention it again, even though we already mentioned last time, it's going to mention it towards the end of the section. وتوسطها في العشاء وتكون السورة الأولى قبل الثانية. So it's also recommended that the surah he reads in the first rak'ah comes before the surah he reads in the second rak'ah. So for example, in al-Maghrib, he's going to read Surah Al-Kafirun and then Surah Al-Nas, because Surah Al-Nas comes after Surah Al-Kafirun. So it's recommended that the first surah, the first rak'ah comes before the second surah and the second rak'ah in order. وأطول منها. So again, the first surah, it should be longer than the second surah, but just a recommendation. والهيئة المعلومة في الركوع والسجود. So the normal position, the perfect position of the sunnah is recommended in ruku' and sujood. As we discussed last time, in ruku' it suffices that your hands are close enough to your knees. However, the recommended action is that they are placed on the knees. So the known position, al-hay'a al-ma'luma, is recommended in ruku' and in sujood. Wal-julus, similarly for julus, there is a recommended position, which is at-tawarruk, which is to place your right foot upright with the toes facing the qibla and the left foot under it, while your the bottom of your left thigh would be touching the ground, as opposed to the position of al-iftirash, in which the person is sitting on his left foot, and so the bottom of his body would not touch the ground. So, inshallah, I can send a picture detailing the exact images, because verbal description might not suffice for some people. But tawarruk is the recommended position. However, any position sitting down would suffice, whether it's on both of the feet or the left foot is facing the wrong direction, etc. والقنوت سرا قبل الركوع وبعد السورة في ثانية الصبح. So in صلاة الصبح, it is recommended to do qunut in secret, meaning not out loud, as is done in the Shafi'i madhab. It's done quietly, and it is done before going into ruku'. As opposed to the Shafi'i madhab, we do it after coming up from ruku'. So it's recommended to do qunut before going to ruku' and to do it quietly, and it suffices if it is done after ruku', as it says, وَيَجُوزُ بَعْدَ الرُّكُوعِ. If he comes after ruku', if he forgets and then he goes into ruku' and then remembers after he comes back up, he can still do qunut then. It would not nullify the salah for changing the order because it's a recommended action. وَالدُّعَاءُ بَعْدَ التَّشَهُّدِ الثَّانِي. So at the very end of the salah, after the tashahhud and after as-salah on Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it is recommended to make dua. ويكون التشهد الثاني أطول من الأول. والتيامن بالسلام. So it is recommended for the second tashahhud in the prayers that do have two tashahhuds, which is all of them except for as-subh. So the second tashahhud should be longer than the first one, and it is recommended to do tayamun, to look on the right while saying as-salam. Tayamun bis-salam. So we say for the imam or the person praying alone, he would say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So he would face the right at the end of the salam, rather than look to the right and then begin the salam, as some other fuqaha do. They would look at the right and then say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. No, we would start facing the middle, and then towards the end, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, we would face the right direction. This is a recommended action, as is known throughout all the ummah. وتحريك السبابة في التشهد. So there are many positions on the position of the sababa, the pointer finger, during tashahhud. Some would keep it down and only bring it up when you say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Others keep it up throughout the entire tashahhud. The Maliki madhab, we keep it up but move it throughout the entire tashahhud. So of course it will be on my foot, but as it is not in the camera, you would move it up and down throughout the entire tashahhud. This is recommended, however, any other position would suffice. Even leaving the entire sababa moving would suffice for the purposes of salah, but he would leave the recommended action. ويكره الالتفات في الصلاة وتغميض العينين والبسملة والتعوذ. So as we mentioned just a minute ago, the basmala and the ta'awudh are disliked. Similarly, closing the eyes for no valid reason is disliked. والالتفات. So again, moving around, looking around towards the salah is also disliked. However, looking upwards directly is more disliked than any other direction because of the nas in that direction. So looking upwards towards the salah is disliked strongly, if not haram, according to some others. وتغميض العينين والبسملة والتعوذ في الفريضة ويجوزان في النفل. So generally speaking, some things that are disliked in fara'id, in obligatory prayers, they are not disliked in nawafil prayers. Now that doesn't mean that they are liked, that they are mustahab. Rather, they just become permissible. And this applies to many things. Some of them, as we just mentioned, are al-basmala and al-ta'awudh. If he mentions them in the nafila, it's not disliked, it's just permissible. Similarly, وَالْوُقُوفُ عَلَى رِجْلٍ وَاحِدَةٍ إِلَّا أَنْ يَطُولَ قِيَامُهُ. So standing on one foot is also disliked, except that he's standing for a long time, and he's just moving it up to get the weight off of his foot, just to move it around a bit. Especially during the long nawafil such as tarawih, it's permissible to do this. It's not disliked to do this because too much being tired for too long a period of time may distract you from the salah. And so it is more recommended that you remain focused in the salah than to not move up the foot for a bit and take the weight off of your foot. So إلا أن يطول قيامه. So except that his standing takes too long. واقتران رجليه. So putting his feet beside each other while standing is also disliked. They should be shoulder width apart. وجعل درهم أو غيره بفمه. So anything in his mouth. وكذلك كل ما يشوشه في جيبه أو كمه أو على ظهره. Anything in his mouth, anything on his back, on his head, on his sleeves, even on the floor technically, but even though he does not mention it, anything that is going to distract you, whether it's a large jacket that keeps moving around when you go into ruku', or it's a hat, it's a turban that is not tied properly, and every time you go into ruku' or sujood, it comes on your face and you have to keep moving it. Anything that is going to distract you in this way is very, very disliked, as it removes the khushu', it removes the focus of the prayer. طيب. والتفكير في أمور الدنيا وكل ما يشغله عن الخشوع في الصلاة. So similarly, thinking about the dunya, even if you're not moving around, even if there's nothing causing it, simply thinking about the dunya is disliked. And وكل ما يشغله, anything that distracts him from khushu' is disliked. طيب. Before we move on to the next subsection, which we will end with, we're going to talk a little bit about sadl and qabd. Now, when you ask any person, any layman, they're going to tell you that the mashhur position of the Maliki madhab is sadl, to put your hands to your sides. While some others will tell you that the mashhur position is to do qabd. And the answer is that they are both correct. In the madhab, there's no absolute ruling. The rulings pertaining to sadl and qabd change depending on the reason. Ibn al-Qasim, rahimahullah, in the Mudawwana, and we discussed what the Mudawwana is, in the first class, and again, actually, a few classes in. The Mudawwana is a collection of fatawa. Ibn al-Qasim, rahimahullah, asks Imam Malik, rahimahullah, about folding your hands, and Imam Malik says, I dislike it. Okay, why does he dislike it? There's no context given. There's no explicit context being given by that statement. However, because it's a collection of fatawa, unlike a hadith book, which is a collection of narrations that are separated by multiple narrators, Ibn al-Qasim, and the person who, of course, collected the Mudawwana, Imam Sahnun, he went to Ibn al-Qasim directly, and so there is context between them when writing this book. And so Sahnun, when writing the book and dividing its chapters, he includes this narration in the chapter of leaning in Salah, meaning leaning on a wall or leaning on a pillar. And so the mu'tamad, the relied upon position of the Maliki madhab is that it is only makruh to fold your hands if it is being done for the purpose of leaning, for the purpose of stabilizing your body. Any other reason would not make qabd or folding your hands makruh. Meaning, the person who folds his hands for no reason, it is not makruh. The person who folds his hands to follow the sunnah, to follow the specific ahadith that mention the Prophet ﷺ folding his hands, then it is not makruh to do it, rather it is mustahab. And this is mentioned in all of the relied upon commentaries of Mukhtasar Khalil and Aqrab al-Masalik, which are the official texts of the madhab. Now, this does not mean that qabd is a sunnah, because we didn't mention it in the sunnah. No other official text mentions it in the sunnah. Rather, it's a fadila. And al-Akhdari, rahimahullah, he does not mention it in the fada'il. He mentions neither sadl nor qabd. However, if you go to the advanced text, you'll find that the issue of sadl and qabd are referred to in the fada'il, not in the sunan. Because as we said multiple times, the sunan are actions that the Prophet ﷺ did throughout his life, whereas the fada'il are things he left sometimes and did sometimes. So, sadl and qabd are both things which the Prophet ﷺ did, according to most of the madhab, and of course some others who would disagree, but that's not what we're talking about right now. The point is that both of them are fada'il. And I talked about this at length last time, that they are not something to fight about. They're not something to argue about with other people, because they are not sunan or fara'il. They're not obligatory actions. Meaning it's okay if, even according to the people who say it's only recommended to do so, even though their position is incorrect, even according to them, sadl is not a sunnah, it's a fadila. And similarly, for the people saying to do qabd, none of them say it's a sunnah, they all say it's a fadila. It's the lowest rank. It's not a fard, it's not a sunnah, it's a fadila. So it's not something to fight over. Because the Prophet ﷺ, it's not recorded from him, or it's not narrated from him that he did either of them throughout his entire life. It's not narrated that he did qabd throughout his entire life, and it's also not narrated that he did sadl throughout his entire life. Rather, if someone were to do qabd based on the few ahadith that show that he did this at some point or another, then he is doing a fadila, and it is mustahab for him to do it. If someone were to leave it, it wouldn't be leaving a sunnah. It would just be leaving a fadila. As for the person, as we mentioned in the beginning, as for the person doing it for the purposes of being tired and stabilizing his body, then it would be, even then it would only be makruh, it would only be disliked. So the same way, if someone is closing, we mentioned before that closing the eyes is disliked. The same way that if you see someone closing his eyes, you wouldn't cause a fight over it. Similarly, if you see someone doing qabd, by priority, there's no reason to fight over it. So again, I talked about this at length last time, and we talked about it a good amount right now. That should be enough. So basically, in summary, the madhab is that if you are doing it for the purpose of imitating the Prophet ﷺ, then it is mustahab. Otherwise, it is permissible. And if you are doing it for the purposes of being tired and leaning and stabilizing your body, then it becomes makruh. طيب. فصل. الصلاة نور عظيم تشرق به القلوب المصلين ولا يناله إلا الخاشعون. Salah has a great light that rises in the hearts of the people who pray, and it is only achieved by those who have khushu'. The person who prays without khushu' is not going to achieve this light in his heart that comes from salah. فإذا أتيت إلى الصلاة ففرق قلبك من الدنيا وما فيها واشتغل بمراقبة مولاك. So if you come to Salah, empty your heart from the dunya and what it contains, and واشتغل, work towards watching your Lord. And muraqabah here, watching, it does not mean physical watching, it means watching with the heart, knowing with the heart, not seeing with the eyes. So look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your heart during the prayer. بمراقبة مولاك الذي تصلي له, the person you are praying for in the first place. So الذي تصلي لوجهه, واعتقد أن الصلاة خشوع وتواضع لله سبحانه. So know that the purpose of Salah is khushu', focus, and tawadhu', humility towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, بالقيام والركوع والسجود, regardless of whether it's while standing or in ruku' or sujood. وإجلال وتعظيم له, and it's also glorifying and magnifying Him. بالتكبير والتسبيح, so saying Allahu Akbar, doing tasbih in ruku' and in sujood, with any dhikr, any dua, all of it is part of glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in salah. حافظ على صلاتك فإنها أعظم العبادات ولا تترك الشيطان يلعب بقلبك. So preserve your salah, maintain your salah, and know that it is the most important of your ibadat. ولا تترك الشيطان يلعب بقلبك, and do not allow the shaitan to play with your heart. ويشغلك عن صلاتك حتى يطمس قلبك ويحرمك من لذة أنوار الصلاة. If the shaitan does busy you from the salah, then he will shut your heart and prevent you from the pleasure of the light of salah. فعليك بدوام الخشوع. So he's addressing his students, saying, preserve and maintain the consistency in your khushu'. Have khushu' all the time. Do not leave it for some salahs and not for others. فإنها تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر بسبب الخشوع فيها فاستعن بالله إنه خير مستعان. Salah, as the Quran says, prevents from al-fahsha wal-munkar. So the major sins, the major bad habits are prevented by salah, but only people who have khushu'. The person who prays, and then as soon as he finishes his prayer, he goes to do a ma'siyah, he goes to do a bad deed, then he has not truly had khushu'. Because if he was truly doing salah for the purposes of salah, then as soon as he finished, he would not have had the intention, he would not have had the motivation to do something bad. Because salah would remove these intentions from his heart. فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ, so seek Allah's support. إِنَّهُ خَيْرٌ مُسْتَعَانٌ, He is the best of people who you can seek support from. And that is where we will stop for today. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.